whispers or shouts from the universe that kept saying, you really need to understand this. You really need to look into this. And so I just started reading and researching and kind of quickly came to the conclusion that it has everything to do with quantum physics.
You're listening to the No Labels, No Limits podcast with best-selling author Sarah Box. We focus on the mantra, no labels, no limits, no excuses. And now without further ado, please welcome your commanding coach with plenty of chutzpah and heart, Sarah Box.
Hey there, everybody. This is Sarah, your host of the No Labels, No Limits podcast. I am excited to welcome another guest today, but I'm going to tell you, I love going into detail with our guests, and sometimes we plan one thing and then it goes a whole other direction because of how inspiring they are or what they bring to the table. So as always, my goal for this podcast today is to bring you something you might not have thought about before by sharing a very special guest with you. And that's Audrey Gale. Now, some of you may already have known her. She's an author, but Audrey is an author who works to delve into the intriguing intersection of traditional medicine and groundbreaking scientific discoveries. So she's had a successful 2-decade career in banking, but after that, she's pursued her passion for writing. She's earned a master's degree in fiction writing from the University of Southern California, and her novels, including the medical thriller trilogy starting with The Human Trial, explore the often suppressed scientific breakthroughs that could revolutionize our approach to health and wellness. And listeners might be surprised to learn about her deep passion for bridging the gap between traditional medicine and scientific breakthroughs. And she has this deep commitment to uncovering the hidden possibilities, and that they can serve as an inspiration to advocate for ourselves, our individual selves, but also within this larger system of healthcare. And we had a really fun little chit chat before I hit record. So we're going to recreate that. Maybe we'll probably go a different direction as well. Who knows? But with that, let me formally welcome Audrey to the No Labels, No Limits podcast. Hi, Audrey.
Hi, Sarah. Thank you so much for having me today. I'm happy to be here. And our initial conversation took us right off. We just shot out of the gate. So this is going to be fun.
Yeah. Well, I'm very interested in you. You've talked about exploring suppressed healing methodologies and incorporating quantum physics into medical science. But I want to start by asking you a question. You made mention in our little chat about something your father said that really stuck with me when he said it. So will you just share that saying of his?
Yes. So you will find, I'm sure, as we go through this conversation, that my father was a great inspiration. He may be gone, but he still inspires me. And one of his favorite sayings was, the mind is the maker. And as I grew up, and as I began working in various trades, including my writing career, I just realized exactly how true that is. Sarah and I were just conversing about the saying, the mind is the maker. And because we may tend to be slightly more negative or self-critical than we are absolutely open and optimistic and expecting great things coming our way at all times, we do tend to self-limit ourselves. And I am as guilty as anyone. I do keep getting nudged by the universe, so I keep going forward. But, it's easy to fall into self-doubt and who do I think I am? Those tend to be messages we all got in our childhood. And why do I think I can speak on this subject? And so on and so forth. All those tapes play. And so I'm still a work in progress of controlling the clear vision of the path I want, the path I'm working for, the path I'm pursuing in all my waking and sleeping times. And so it's just important that when I finally feel like I've arrived at really controlling all of that, I will let you know, Sarah. You'll be the first one. But
When
meanwhile,
you tell me that, I'm going to go watch out because now some new thing's going to come for you because we never arrive, right? We
yeah.
start resting on our laurels and then all of a sudden you're going, whoops.
Yeah, no, I don't
So
know. I don't see resting on laurels coming anytime soon, but
me
it may.
either.
It may. I don't know. Maybe it'd be nice for a little respite. But
Yeah.
anyway, I believe thoroughly that the mind is the maker, and so it's something that we all can work on. We can all aspire to having a very clear vision of what we want, what we hope for, and keeping that vision clear and in front of ourselves as much as possible every minute of every day. That's a challenge.
It sure can be because there's a number of things that I think try to snag our attention, right? It's like, oh, pay attention to this, pay attention to that. And they're interesting. Some of them are even important, but it's a practice to be able to come back like, that's interesting, it's important, but let me come back to this, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it doesn't mean to the exclusion of other things, but to stay focused on what you're trying to do, right?
Right.
So let's talk about, there's so many things we could go towards, but I want to talk about your work in exploring the suppressed healing methodologies. And you often highlight the non-traditional methods that face suppression. Can you discuss some of those methodologies and why they might be seen as a threat by traditional medical establishments?
Yes, I certainly can talk about that. I had 3 personal experiences that pushed me into writing this book. And the first one was a very profound experience that I had with acupuncture and Chinese herbs. I had a very serious disease in my mid-30s. My lymphatic system was completely swollen and infected. You could see my lymph glands down my shins, down my arms. And I was living in San Francisco at the time, and my internist, my MD, examined me, tried some things, and sent me to every specialist he could think of. And, the oncologist, the exotic disease, everything in between. And nothing any of them did had any effect. My lymphs were still swollen, visible, sore, painful. And so I kind of concluded that I was going to die of lymphoma. I mean, what do I know? It just seemed like an obvious conclusion. But a guy that I worked with at the time in San Francisco in the financial district said to me, I would really like you to come and visit my acupuncturist. She is in Oakland. So we took the BART? Bay Area Rapid Transit? BART. We went across to Oakland and I walked into this, Dr. O was her name. I love the name. And she stabbed one of my lymph glands and said, I don't care what you call this, you have a serious infection throughout your body. And she gave me an acupuncture treatment, and there probably were a couple follow-ups, but not a lot. Then she sent me next door to her brother, Dr. O, number 2, who was the Chinese herbalist. And he gave me a nasty smelling and looking concoction of dried herbs and told me, you will not eat anything but vegetable smoothies with as much onion and garlic as you can tolerate with this powder in it. But the good news was I could have it as many times a day as I wanted. So I did exactly what he said. I was really getting desperate by this time. And all I can say is the result was miraculous. There's no other word, miraculous. By the next morning, you could see that the swelling had gone down. I was starting to feel like a normal human being. I was starting to look like a normal human being. And so I don't know if it was a week later or 3 days later, but I went back to my doctor, my internist, and I said, I would like you to examine me. And he went, holy mackerel, what have you been doing? And I told him acupuncture and Chinese herbs. And he said, well, in his opinion, there's a place for both. He thinks Chinese methodologies are for people whose immune system can still fight, can be propped up, can be supported a little bit, and can still fight off whatever. He thinks that Western medicine is for those people who can no longer fight for themselves. Their immune systems won't kick in properly. So that's his opinion. It's not really my opinion, but it does say something about like where his opinion made sense to me is if you're in the terrible car accident and you're taken to the emergency room, that's when you need all that stuff. But anyway, so he was dumbfounded, and I returned to complete health in no time. And so that started opening my eyes, but it took a couple more experiences. The first was when I moved to Los Angeles, and I had a 13-year-old golden retriever. Now, I didn't know a whole lot of people in Los Angeles, and so my golden retriever was not just my best friend, but my only friend. And she became very ill, and she had something similar. Her skin was swollen and oozing, and something was really wrong. And I took her to multiple vets looking for a vet I could put my faith into, and they all said the same thing: put her down. She's a 13-year-old big dog. She's had her life. Just put her down. And I just couldn't. So I looked in the yellow pages. You guys might remember yellow pages. And I looked for holistic vets. I found two. I called them both. And the one that could take me to first ended up being a big influence on my life. And again, the universe whispering something to me. He did the same thing. He basically cured her in a very short time. He used chiropractic, he used acupuncture, but he also used sounds, frequency or vibrational spectrum. And so of course, I was incredibly curious about what are you doing? And he was very generous to tell me that he'd studied some scientists who actually had been working in the 20s and 30s. And he was not able to replicate their work exactly because it required a very sophisticated lab, which he didn't have. But he was able to take the frequency treatment, the vibrational resonance is what it really boils down to. He could take it down by octaves. And I always thought of it as the piano, as the keyboard on the piano, the middle C, the high C, the low C. They're related. They're harmonically related. The physics term is harmonics. And so he could dumb it down, for want of a better word, to the sound spectrum, and he made a cassette tape. And so when my father was then subsequently diagnosed with leukemia and came to my home after his first and last chemotherapy treatment, he said very clearly, Audrey, I don't care. I'm not going back. I would rather die than have that again. So he had a very hard time. So I said to him, if you asked me what I thought you should do, I would tell you should come with me to my vet. And so my father, we were talking about two sides of brains, very active, an engineer, a mystic. He said, well, what have I got to lose? So off we went to the vet, who also gave him a cassette tape of sounds. Again, step down from the frequency. And what that frequency is, well, maybe I should just finish my story with my dad, and then I'd like to come back to what those scientists discovered. Because that's what this all relates to. So if I get lost, you'll pull me back, right?
I'll bring you back. I'm lost in your story, so keep going. I want to hear what happens with your dad at the vet.
Okay, so
I actually would like my vet to be my doctor, but I won't tell
I know. And I could not speak about this until my vet had died. He was very old when I found him, and he lived some years, but until he was gone, I could not talk about this story completely. So anyway, my dad, sorry?
What happened with your dad?
So he took the cassette tape home. He played it over and over and over and over. And the first thing that happened was he started to feel good. So that kind of leads us to believe, and it's been described like this to me, that a healthy body is one that is in complete sync. It's like a vast orchestra being conducted perfectly. Everybody knows when to come in and when to step out and what their part is, and they play in perfect harmony. The second thing was he just went back to his doctors like I had, and they said, "What have you been doing?" And he couldn't tell them. He just sort of mumbled a little bit about, I just been feeling better. And they called it the damnedest case of spontaneous remission they'd ever seen. So just like my dog dying years later, my dad died years later, not of leukemia. He died of pneumonia, which is pretty common when you get to a certain age. So those were the whispers or shouts from the universe that kept saying, you really need to understand this. You really need to look into this. And so I just started reading and researching and kind of quickly came to the conclusion that it has everything to do with quantum physics being 125 years old now, quantum physics proving that there is no such thing as solids in the universe, despite what we perceive. I perceive my desk to be solid, but if I could look at it the sub microscopic level, I would find nothing but vibrating energy. And that is what makes up all of creation, including us. So then the last step is really me thinking, but isn't it interesting that medicine 125 years later has never seemed to seriously look at what that energetic basis is of life. So that was sort of my long story to say that's how I ended up writing this book, The Human Trial. And if I may just add one last connection. So what the quantum physicists like Einstein and Bohr had told the universe 125 years ago is that we all live in an electromagnetic world. It's infinite concentrations of that energy. And the scientists whom my vet studied had discovered that every disease that they looked at had microbes. If you could look at them alive, which they could on a specimen slide, their microbes all had a different and signature frequency that was attributed just to that particular disease. So those same scientists who discovered that also discovered that if you recreated that frequency and just played it in a room with a diseased body, it killed off the disease microbes and left everything else intact. There's no invasiveness, there's no pain, there's no expense. There's a lot of pluses, all of which kind of flew in the face of how medicine was developing in the United States, which I think we all know is predominantly big pharma oriented. And big pharma has a great deal of control over our politicians, over our regulators, and not only that, but over the way doctors are trained in this country. They make huge contributions to the medical schools. They therefore control curriculum. So we've been kind of weaned away from something that could be so cheap and so quick and so effective.
So I imagine, you interviewed modern day physicists and pathologists for your book. Yeah.
Yes.
So when you were in the process of doing that, what were some of the most surprising or impactful revelations from those discussions that you had? Because this big picture that you're painting for me is surprising and impactful, just hearing that. But when you drill down, what were some of the pieces that really went, whoa? I imagine the resonance or the resonance of the microbes.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I'm so used to saying microbiome. but microbes. I mean, that's a big thing. But what are some of the other things that you might not have expected to find and uncover that really you went, like they were head scratchers? You're going, you have to be.
Yeah, yeah. One of the things, the physicist I worked with most closely was a professor of space physics at UCLA. Well, I mean, how many of us even know what that means? But what it really means is similar to what they were using on the microcosmic level. So on the macrocosmic level, he used the spectrum of light and infrared and so forth to tell him what he's looking at a billion light years away. And that's how space physics, at least in part, operates. And so it's very interesting to me to think about the macrocosm and the microcosm. The microcosm that these scientists were working on in the 30s was the same thing. They were using the color spectrum and able to zero in not so much on what the material is as what the frequency of that light vibration is, and use it to recreate the vibration that would kill that microbe. And it was successful in all kinds of diseases. It was, the human trial is an interesting title because it did go to human trial, these two scientists. And they had multiple diseases, including cancers, including some tumorous cancers where they could watch the cancer, the tumor, disintegrate, dwindle down. So it's the same. I love this. The microcosmic and the macrocosmic. It's the same because it's all the same electromagnetic energy that created all of us and all of creation. That was one of the biggest surprises for me.
So now that you have, first of all, you did the research and you've written this book, and you've seen it, the benefits both to yourself, to your golden retriever, to your dad. Did you see any spin out from that, like other people coming to you or to your dad, or to the vet saying, hey, I need this for me? I mean, did you see any of that where people were going, I'm not sure what to ask for, but I want that?
Well, the problem was at the time that we couldn't talk about the vet because he would have been fined, his business would have been closed, or he could have been jailed.
Sure.
The medical establishment is very, very, they closely guard the use of medical terms and who can practice what, very specifically, which is another surprise. And also, I couldn't talk about it until my vet had passed on, which was some years later. So really, it's now that I am talking about it much more freely and telling my little history of arriving here that people are saying, well, where do you get that? And where can you get that? And like I went to a conference in 2016 in Phoenix, and it was based on the study of one of these great scientists. His name was Dr. Royal Rife, R-I-F-E. And at that conference, let me see. Can you see this big fat book here that I'm pointing at?
It's a heavy one?
Yeah.
A weapon?
It's called the Rife Handbook. Yes, it is a weapon, actually. It's called the Rife Handbook. And in it, you'll find every disease that you've ever dreamed of and its exact frequency. This stuff is known. It's just people are very reluctant to come out of the woodwork because so many early practitioners even were sort of chased down. They had to turn in all of their equipment that they'd gotten in relation to frequency and resonance vibration treatments, and all of Rife's microscopes, which really had enabled these discoveries in the first place, all of those disappeared. And they have never, to this day, that's 100 years now, been able to recreate that microscope. So that was a huge loss. But there are people out there, and I've had two of them on my little meet the other side of the health coin Zoom, my speaker series. I've had two really great ones on Edna Tunney is the head of a company in Vancouver. No, it's north of Vancouver. I don't know where it is, but anyway, Canada. And it's the company is called Resident Light Technology. Now that's where the machine I bought after that conference is from. And her husband, along with another scientist by the name of Dr. James Bare, B-A-R-E, her husband and Dr. Bare were able to replicate much of this equipment. So it's out there. It's also a lot of people claiming to have insights into life and claiming to have quick cures. And it's still incumbent upon you to be really careful before you spend your money. Ask for data, ask for test results, ask for references. But I've been very lucky because I think I went right to the best place for me. And there's societies out there that are studying this. It to me, Sarah, if I may be so bold, this is the future of medicine. One day, like remember back, well, you don't remember, but you've read or heard of, leeching and bloodletting and all that stuff that they did in the Middle Ages. Someday, what we're doing today, I believe, is going to feel equally archaic and excessively cruel and painful and so on, not to mention the expense, which is a whole nother subject that we could go into in American medicine. But someday, this is coming.
No, I think you're right. And more you hear, I read, I listen, and I pay attention to it. This subject to me is very important because I don't believe that you have to have a pill for everything, that if we were upstream and could be healthy, and myself included, that some of this stuff wouldn't be necessary. And I also okay, the side effects of things are sometimes worse than the thing itself. You hear all those disclaimers and no, thank you.
Yeah. And even if they treat a current condition, those side effects might be introducing a future condition. Right. And it's all too common that the cure doesn't stay cured. Well, they don't ever say cure. Cure is a 4-letter word in medical circles, so we don't say cure. I say cure, but they don't say cure. It's frightening what we're putting in our bodies.
Yeah. And there's so much information now. So when you're saying about like looking and researching and getting information, asking for references, that can be overwhelming for someone. So it's helpful to have a guide like yourself who's written some things, who has done some of the base, who can say, look here, consider these, consider it, right?
Yeah.
And there's also when people are vulnerable, when you're sick, when you don't feel well, you reach a point often where you're willing to try anything. And so there's that balance of not victimizing someone or taking advantage of someone who is in that space because you have something to sell them. Right. So, but I do know. So true. Yeah. But I'm curious about the resonance and the vibration because, the sound healing, the healing baths, the sound baths. People who go to those feel them. I mean, it's not, can you quantify it? Can you say this is what changed? But they walked out and they know something shifted in their body because they felt it shift, right? And the higher consciousness is all about resonating, right? Different vibrations. So it makes logical sense that there's a correlation, maybe not causation, but correlation between all of this if we look for it and are open to it. And I remember gosh, well, longer ago than I'd like to tell you. But just something was, I can feel, like, in your body when something's not like it was or should be, right? So I go to my internist. I go, this is what's going on. He goes, okay. So we run all the normal tests. And he goes, are you better? And I said, no. Describe more precisely. I says, not really. He goes, I'm going to tell you that nothing, you don't have any of these check the list things, right? I said, okay. So I asked a friend of mine, I said, I'm stumped. Are you open to seeing an acupuncturist? I'm thinking, I'm open to anything because I want to feel normal. For me, my normal again, because I felt, And sure enough, I make an appointment. I go. It's an hour and a half drive to get there. Do my appointment. Hardly any time with her. She's going, okay, here's what you need. When I was laughing when you said you had this thing to eat or drink, it wasn't that severe for me. She goes, this isn't the best tasting, but I want you to use this for a period of time. I want to see you back here. And it wasn't a lot of revisits. But also, she goes, right now, your body's holding a high sugar content. Not in my blood. It wasn't high blood sugar. But she says you're out of balance, right? Mm. So I'm thinking, oh, I'm sure. I don't know. I wasn't sure to believe or not. So, but I thought, what's to lose? And sure enough, I started feeling better and I went back. I think I had 2 treatments altogether. And I'm going to tell you the drive home after acupuncture, 90 miles on windy roads, I felt like I was on a vacation. It was so great. So I go back to my internist and he says, how are you doing? I says, and I was afraid to tell him, like I'm thinking he's going to think I'm whacked out. And I said, okay, I'm feeling better. He goes, well, you look like you feel better. He goes, what happened? Because I'd gone to a specialist, all that jazz. And the specialist told me, he says, you are within the normal range. And I said, okay. And he says, let me clarify. That doesn't mean it's normal for you. You are within the norm and you may not need, you may live outside that norm. So don't take being in the norm as like, oh, that's all good. And that was from a real regular medical endocrinologist. So anyway, I said, well, I saw this acupuncturist, then I got Chinese herbs and I watched him for like are you kidding me? Look, and he goes, Sarah, here's what I know. We don't know it all. And if that helped and changed for you, I'm all for it. So, and I went, okay, I like this, right? We had a conversation as patient, doctor, healer, person who needed some help, and he wasn't resistant to it. And I thought, those are the only doctors I want to work with from now, people who listen and are open, whether they believe it or not, they're open to it.
Yeah.
So I do know from firsthand experience that I had results. And I do know more and more people, but there is still the stigma about sharing with people, right? Like, oh yeah, right. You do that. That's wacko. I'm thinking, I don't care. It had a positive impact that showed on test results. So, yeah. And so,
you said something really important though. You said something about if you're open to it. This is going all the way back to the mind is the maker.
The mind is the maker.
If you're open to it, then you're letting in all of the goodness that it could offer you. If you're going, people tell me this is bogus, blah, blah, blah. Those messages just mess up the whole attempt at treatment. So you do have to be open to it, open-minded, open-eyed. Those were my 2 goals writing this book.
Open-minded, open eyes. Well, and also to remember for myself, I'm not preaching to others, but I kind of am, but I could be wrong, right? Like, I don't know everything. I like to think I do because we all like to know that we feel like we're in some control about things. We're not. And,
we're not. But what you have going, Sarah.
Pardon?
What you have going for your opinion on acupuncture, et cetera, is, remember, traditional medicine has been around since the mid-1800s. Acupuncture and Chinese herbs and medicine have been around for 5,000 years. That's quite a track record. Whether our medical people are trained in it, exposed to it, understand it. I understand in today's world there is electrical equipment that can actually trace the energy running on your meridians. It's if it's not fact today, it's going to be fact tomorrow.
Well, it's like this is a total tangent, but it's that whole fact today, fact tomorrow. But, I rewatched from 1999, the original movie, The Matrix, right? All that stuff that was so out there. I'm thinking, not really, right? Hello, 2024. Right. Just because the science hasn't caught up, most scientists are very curious and they're open. They're not saying it's this or that, right? They have hypotheses. They're trying to test them. So I just try and think, I don't know. But you have to think about all of the natives people here in our own country and other countries, they know stuff.
They know stuff. They know a lot of stuff. And they don't have that sort of traditional medicine attitude of it's my way. This is what I've been taught. And even so it's really the medical establishment we're being somewhat critical of, because I believe there's a lot of doctors who are curious about this, want to know what it's about, want to investigate. But when you come out of medical school with an MD, you are given a toolbox that contains 3 items: surgery, radiation, and chemotherapy. It's called the standard of practice. And you are held to that. There could be a little fudging here and there, certainly there is. But that's the standard. And if you want to keep your license and you want to be recertified, you kind of have to.
You have to color with the line. Yeah.
Walk the walk. Mm-hmm.
But I know, but I've stood on talked to my doctor. I said, why do I have to do it that way? He says, if you want insurance to cover you, this is the conversation we are going to have today so that it will cover you. And then you're going to call me and tell me that you need a sick visit. And I will prescribe and we will follow up the way you want to. But otherwise, you're going to be paying out of pocket. I said, pardon me for being testy about this, but I believe you are the one who went to school. Why can't you just make these decisions?
Oh, no.
Right. So anyway, that's just a personal gripe I have, because he's very open. I'll say, I think I need those. Okay, let's do that. But we have to do it a certain way. So it's frustrating. It's a weird place to be. And I hope that this current reality evolves to be more inclusive. But I do know I've listened to people who've left the medical profession so they can go into more. They haven't left the profession. They've shifted over to more holistic medicine so they can weave in these other practices. And there's trade-offs for that for them.
Absolutely. The MD title is very, very valuable.
Absolutely.
In today's world.
Well, it says something about someone who's been able to go through school and learn and all of that. But I've also come to have a really high regard for nurse practitioners who know a bunch of stuff and they look different and they have more time allowed. So I just think we're getting there slowly and painfully. And I'd be so excited. I know I'd just be so excited when more modalities are included under that big umbrella.
Right. Well, I think it's going to be up to you and me and everybody that we can talk to demand change, to leap on this wave that's building that says, we're not going to pay twice as much as anybody else in the entire globe for the same medicines and the same treatments and the so blah, blah, blah. We want bigger access, broader access. We want to be able to talk to anybody that we want to talk to, which you can do now, but it won't be under the auspices of insurance and medical traditions. But we're going to have to demand change from ourselves, from our regulators and our politicians. We have to help this wave build.
Yeah, and to be brave about it. So Audrey, before I let you go, I have one other question that kind of popped up when you were talking earlier, and that is the impact of toxins that we ingest or that are around us affecting our resonance. What's going on, our vibration levels, our resonance. Have you learned anything about that?
Well, here's what I've learned about that, which is a little disturbing, maybe a lot disturbing. So what these scientists discovered 100 years ago was that they were looking at this very, very, very minuscule microbe, and they were looking at it in its living state. And they knew, because they were scientists, and one was an MD and one was just a wizard in all science, they knew it wasn't bacterial because it was so much smaller. So they probably assumed it was viral, but they didn't want to use the word because some of the diseases they were studying were known to be fungal, were known to be bacterial, etc. And yet what they were seeing was a viral evolution of this disease. So part of the reason was they were taking samples, fluid draws, etc., from terminal patients in those hospitals. So they were the most diseased people at the last stages of life. And what it seemed to say, I think it seems kind of obvious in retrospect, but what it seemed to say is that just like everything in nature, this microbe was evolving in reaction to its environment. The body's environment was growing increasingly toxic, and therefore the microbe was growing increasingly toxic in response. So I've kind of forgotten your question, Sarah, but did that answer it?
It answered part of it. So, I mean, you answered that in that instance, the microbe was growing more toxic in response to the body growing more toxic, right?
Correct.
So I don't know that I could say accurately that if we're ingesting toxins, whether we know it or not, it also affects the microbes in our bodies. But it seems that's the inference. Is that correct?
Yeah, so I think it's called the microbiome.
Yeah.
All the living jillions.
The bad, the ugly, but they're all billions and billions.
And billions and billions. They're all
really, our biome is huge.
Yeah, billions. Well, 40 trillion cells. Let's just start there. That's already incomprehensible. So yes, of course, part of the problem with modern civilization is we ingest not necessarily the best water. We breathe in not necessarily the cleanest air. Our food is contaminated with all sorts of things. That's all affecting your body. Again, I come back to my quick and dirty answer to all of it is just make sure your immune system is absolutely up to par. Keep it and do whatever you have to do to keep it as strong as possible because it can handle all of this. Well, we're not sure how much it can handle because we're testing things that probably were never intended to be tested, but it can handle it better than anything else. It knows where the problems are in the body. It can reverse electrical flows to go to a wound. It can de-specialize cells in terms of what's needed there. It can re-specialize cells. It is so beyond miraculous what this body of ours can do.
So heal and continue to support your immune system is your takeaway.
Support your immune system, do all the things you know to be right, which is exercise. I think of it as forcing the blood through my body. That helps toxins get pushed out. Eat as organically as you can. I do that. I do some bad things too. I won't tell you about them, but just do what you try to get the proper amount of sleep. Try not to be stressed. There's a big one. And live life as joyously as you can. That's probably the ultimate de-stressor.
Yeah, laughter has been proven to be a big de-stressor.
Mm-hmm. Indeed.
So I'm going to give you the last word on the podcast. But before I do that, I want to thank you for being a guest on the podcast, Audrey. I've enjoyed our conversation. You've given me some things to think about and to learn more about, which is my happy place to learn more.
Good.
So I will look forward to that. I know that you offer something for our listeners from your website. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, so My website is simply Audrey Gale, Gale, Audrey spelled Audrey, Gale, Gale, author.com. And on my website is a little link. It says events.audreygaleauthor.com. And that's where my little speaker series, you can sign up there. And we are bringing everyone we can bring, acupuncturists, spiritual, intuitive healers. We had an MD psychiatrist from Colombia. We've had a lot of variety, and that is the intention, is let's hear what everyone's saying. And honestly, everyone's starting to talk about the vibrations.
Yeah.
That's how I know this is coming.
I'm excited about that shift because I've been listening to people I interview talk about that when I listen and read, and it's exciting to see it coming. And of course, it's always the tendency is to want it to come faster sooner, but it's coming. We just have to keep it moving.
Yeah.
So I appreciate you being a guest. Leave us with one word or thought that you would like us to take into the rest of our day whenever we're listening to this.
I think maybe it's a hyphenated word, but it might count as one. But self-responsibility is really where it has to come down to. You have the right to interview experts in every walk of medicine and life. And then you get to decide what resonates with you. And something generally resonates. Your body is saying, yeah, I think this might be something we should look into. That's the body's wisdom, and it is not to be diminished in any way.
Okay, No Labels, No Limits podcast listeners, we're going to end it there. I encourage you, wherever you're listening to this, to leave us a comment about something you took away from Audrey's sharing today, or if you've had a healing event similar, like from a non-traditional medicine, we'd be very curious to find out what your experience has been. We are not looking for people to sell us stuff. We're not buying products, none of that. But we really would like to know what your experience was. So please share it. And other people who read your comment may benefit from it. So thanks so much, and we'll see you all next week.
You've been listening to the No Labels, No Limits podcast with best-selling author, change agent, and strategic business coach, Sarah Box. You can grab the show notes and find out how to work with Sarah at sarahbox.com/No Labels, No Limits podcast. We'd love this podcast to reach as many people as possible. Please remember to rate, leave a 5-star review, and share the podcast with someone you think would get value from this conversation. Till next time, keep taking those daily action steps to align your purpose to your principles and achieve your goals in business and life.